Welcome to today's story, an intense journey into the ruthless world of corporate power. Our main character is Carol R. Ellis, a woman who spent over 8 years building the backbone of Core Sentry, the very structure that kept the company alive. Yet, in a single moment, she was dismissed by Travis, the arrogant nephew of the CEO, who thought flashy slides and empty slogans could replace real leadership. But Carol was not someone who could be erased so easily. Behind her quiet smile lay resilience, foresight, and a strength that no one expected. What began as an insult would soon become the turning point of everything. The first thing you need to picture is silence. Corporate silence. Not the kind where people are working, but the kind where every head is tilted just slightly, waiting to see if something outrageous is really about to happen. That was the silence in the acquisition boardroom the day Travis, the CEO's nephew, 28 years old, jawline sharp enough to cut glass but mind as empty as a forgotten inbox, leaned back in a leather chair and announced my exit from the company. He didn't just announce it, he performed it. His voice carried with the smug confidence of a man who thought leadership was just theater with better catering. "Take your 2 weeks and go quietly," he said, as if he were doing me a favor. As if dismissing the woman who had built the operational backbone of Core Sentry over 8 long years was no different than calling last round at a trivia night. My name, my contribution, my blood, and late nights and weekend calls, all condensed into a theatrical flourish to impress the buyers seated across the table. The executives from Nordell Systems, the private equity firm evaluating us for a $600 million acquisition, stared at him the way you might stare at a raccoon trying to drive a golf cart. Polite disbelief, equal parts pity and horror. One man, Rolex flashing under the fluorescent lights, scribbled something into his folder, his pen tapping nervously. Another, less subtle, tilted her phone slightly to capture the spectacle. Everyone was watching, everyone except me. I just smiled. Not the smile of surrender, but the kind that comes when you've been forced to watch a slow-motion car crash and suddenly realize the driver thinks he's winning a race. Travis thought this was his moment of triumph, the scene where the young lion pushes the elder aside. But he had no idea the very stage he strutted on had been set, brick by brick, by the woman he was trying to erase. Inside me, the humiliation burned, yes, but beneath it was something harder, clarity. This wasn't new. This was the oldest story in corporate America. The loud young man who mistakes arrogance for talent, who believes nepotism is destiny. I had lived this story before, in smaller rooms with less expensive coffee, where women were thanked for their legacy contributions right before being shoved aside. What made this time different was that Travis wasn't just insulting me. He was insulting the company itself, the fragile skeleton I had held together with my own 2 hands, through chaos, through leadership changes, through the silent weight of responsibility that never appeared on an org chart. Travis strutted on, cologne clouding the air, a tight blazer straining against his frame as though even fabric resisted him. Behind him, the screen glowed with a frozen PowerPoint slide. Core Sentry 2.0, streamlined, synergized, savage. Savage was the word he chose. I almost laughed. Savage wasn't what we needed. We needed competence, patience, systems that actually worked. We needed someone who understood that synergy was just a word on a slide if payroll couldn't run by Monday. But in Travis's head, the buyers were dazzled. In reality, their eyes flickered toward one another, unreadable but sharp. These weren't casual executives. They had flown in from Chicago with binders fat with data. They knew how to spot operational decay the way a health inspector spots mold in a walk-in fridge. And Travis, whether he realized it or not, was already decomposing in front of them. He did what men in power often do when they sense their performance isn't landing. He invoked me, pretending to honor while erasing. Carol's been a huge part of our legacy team, he said, his tone dripping with false gratitude. But we're moving in a new direction. Lean, agile, aggressive. She'll be stepping down after a brief transition. 2 weeks should be plenty. He didn't even look at me. I was already a ghost in his script, boxed up and erased. What he didn't know, what made me press my smile tighter, was that I had been working with the Nordell team for weeks. Quietly, carefully. Not to beg for my relevance, not to seek revenge, but because someone had to keep this company from collapsing before the ink dried. I answered their questions when Travis couldn't. I rescheduled audits he canceled by mistake. I forwarded the right documents when their VP of integration asked for red flags. I wasn't snitching. I was safeguarding. And now, sitting in that room, watching him perform his power play, I knew something Travis did not. The more he pushed me out of the spotlight, the brighter it became. Every buyer's sideways glance was delicious, not because it vindicated me, but because it confirmed what I had always suspected, that the truth, when preserved quietly and carefully, has a way of surfacing at exactly the right moment. I looked across the table at Nordell's CEO. His expression hadn't shifted once. Hands folded neatly on the binder in front of him, a yellow sticky note peeking from page 14. Page 14, the fuse. I didn't know yet when it would ignite, but I knew the match had just been struck. Inside, I thought of the thousands of nights I'd given to this company, the emails drafted at midnight, the supply chain crisis I'd solved on the back of a diner napkin, the hurricane contingency plan that earned us a risk rating boost. I thought of all the women like me, invisible until the system trembles, then suddenly indispensable, then discarded once the danger passes. I thought of how corporate America feeds on us, the quiet keepers of continuity, and then hands the credit to men like Travis. And still, I smiled. Because the humiliation wasn't an ending. It was the prologue. Travis believed he had buried me, but he had only planted me deeper. And the buyers, silent, expressionless, were already beginning to water the soil. The day the old CEO left was not a handoff. It was a vanishing act. No transition binder, no passwords list, no vendor renewal calendar, no compliance roadmap, just a fluorescent lit break room where the donuts went stale under a Slack announcement no one understood. Travis will be assuming executive oversight until further notice. Notice, as it turned out, was the only thing we would never get. He appeared the next morning late, carrying a mug that read, World's okayest leader. The laminate badge around his neck looked like it had been printed 5 minutes earlier, which it had. He called an all hands and opened with, "We're going to disrupt some silos, people," as if the building itself might applaud. I watched from the second row as he paced, hands flying, buzzwords spilling out in a froth, leaner, faster, agile, innovation, accelerate, synergy, like the foam on a poorly poured latte. None of it connected to payroll, which was due Friday, or to the union schedules that locked our staffing into 3 rotating shifts, or to the background checks that had to clear before vendor payments could move again. He had mastered the science of saying nothing in a way that sounded like something. By Wednesday, the first fire drill lit up my phone. Legal. We're finalizing 3 pending contracts. Who has signature authority? The answer used to be the CEO or me, proxy. Now the answer was, no one. Travis had streamlined the approval chain by removing names he didn't recognize. He told me, chin tilted, that master access was a vibes thing. If he believed he had it, he did. By Thursday, it pinged me that the system's dashboard showed a phantom admin account with no MFA. "Travis claims it's his," they wrote, "but the email is a burner." I closed my eyes for a long breath, then made a list. You cannot fix a corporation by shouting at it. You fix it by tightening bolts in the dark. I rescheduled 2 vendor audits that Travis had canceled because the calendar reminders annoyed him. I adjusted the timing on a quarterly review because he moved it to Transformation Thursday, without noticing that our largest supplier was in a different time zone and had a national holiday. I rewrote the procurement checklist so that legal would stop falling into holes Travis had dug with his bold simplifications. At 11:13 p.m. Friday, I sent an after-hours note to a freight partner whose signed addendum had been misfiled when Bryce, the new director of strategic transformation, Travis's frat buddy, deleted a protected folder to reduce legacy clutter. The addendum was needed to release 2 containers of Q3 inventory. Without it, $1 million of product sat on a dock, gathering late fees and seagulls. When I finally shut my laptop, the office was a grid of blue screen glow boxes and exhausted bodies. That was the thing about invisible labor. It left fingerprints on every surface and no name on any plaque. I'd been just ops for 8 years, which meant I made the machine purr while everyone else posed for pictures with the car. It also meant I could hear the engine stutter before anyone smelled the smoke. A week into Travis's reign, he removed me from cross-functional calls. "Ops shouldn't be in the room for strategy," he said, voice clipped with the assurance of someone who had failed Intro to Microeconomics twice and blamed the professor for not getting his leadership style. I didn't fight it. I sipped lukewarm coffee, nodded like a woman too tired to care, and started tagging every meeting cancellation in red. You don't win a corporate war by yelling. You win it by keeping a ledger. Bryce arrived with a standing desk, a ring light, and a whiteboard covered in verbs that meant nothing. Disrupt, scale, synergize, future-proof. He optimized the invoicing workflow by removing 2 approval steps that existed for legal compliance. Less friction, he grinned. The next morning, our vendor payment queue stalled. One supplier drove to HQ personally, face flushed, and threatened to repossess leased equipment. Bryce took a selfie in the lobby, while facilities begged me to explain what a UCC lien was. Meanwhile, compliance became an abstract painting. Travis decided, in a Slack post stamped with a rocket emoji, that our audit platform was legacy bloat. He migrated workflows to a cheaper SaaS with a chatbot named Savvy, who answered every question with, "I'm still learning." Legal flagged a data sync issue. Vendor management couldn't log in. Procurement got stuck behind Savvy's cheerful ignorance. 5 critical vendors were frozen. No W-9s, no background checks, no payment routing. Q4 inventory ticked toward 0 while Transformation Thursday in the break room served cucumber water and visions. By then, Nordell had noticed. Of course they had. They were the kind of buyers who could spot operational decay faster than mold in a walk-in fridge. My inbox started to grow a second spine. Quiet messages from integration, risk, and legal. At first, I was CC'd alongside 5 others. Then, a direct question. "Carol, can you confirm onboarding metrics under Scenario B?" It didn't say, "Ask Travis." It said, "Carol." I answered with page numbers and lines. If you speak quietly enough and only when you have facts, people lean in to hear you. The first not quite accident came on a Zoom Travis forwarded without reading. We were reviewing asset inventories. Alan from Nordell, pinstripe brain, patient voice, asked whether we had clean vendor onboarding metrics for 3 years. Travis stared, as if someone had asked him to recite the quadratic formula in Portuguese. I waited half a beat, then said, "Yes." Second tab, line 42 onward, late cycle recovery factors in column D. Silence. Then a soft, "Thanks, that's helpful." After the call, a DM arrived. Open to a short side channel chat regarding continuity risks? 15 minutes. Off calendar. Informational alignment. I wrestled with it for 2 hours, and then I didn't wrestle at all. I knew the difference between whistleblowing and stewardship. I wasn't leaking. I was preserving the company I had bled for, the machine I had built from bolts and grit. So I took the call. Then I took another. I didn't editorialize. I just answered questions and attached the right documents. Post-close risk matrix? Yes. Q2 attached. Exposure from compliance software shift? Yes. See audit trail. Page 3, line 17. Evidence of internal misalignment on Q4 deliverables? I sent 2 strategy docs, Finance's sober version and Travis's Slack-fueled fever dream, all gradients and verbs. The more I said less, the more they asked me. And the more Travis postured, the louder his emptiness sounded. He copied buyers on memos where he took credit for plans I had spent 6 months building. He spun mistakes as innovation and called my warnings alarmist. When I found him laughing over protein bars with Bryce and told him our vendor queue had stalled, he cut me off with a sermon about adaptive mindsets. I went quiet. When a 3-year logistics partnership fell through because Bryce missed a renewal deadline, I handed finance my Q1 failover list without CCing Travis. The buyers noticed who had the flashlight when the lights went out. At night, I wrote a continuity framework. 1 file, password protected, structured, dated, documented. Not a pitch, not a plea. Bones and ligaments. The things you need to keep a body alive during surgery. I didn't send it to Nordell's leadership through channels. I waited for the right name and the right moment. It came from a VP of integration named Maya. Do you have any kind of continuity framework you'd recommend? I replied with the file. An hour later, this is gold. Can I copy Travis in? I typed, better not yet. In corporate wars, the deadliest weapons are hidden in the footnotes and in who you CC. The following week, I woke to a legal doc from Nordell's Transition Council. Core Sentry Transition Staffing, draft for internal review. No message. The continuity lead line was blank. I moved the email to a folder called Just in Case and sat very still. That's how power feels when it starts to gather. Not like thunder, but like pressure beneath the floor. Travis, oblivious to the weight pressing up from below, kept performing. He scheduled brainstorming sessions with beanbag chairs and kombucha. He told finance that cash flow was just more sales. He rebranded the company with fonts he found on TikTok, calling it Core Sentry 2.0, streamlined, synergized, savage. He removed ops from strategy because it looked good on a slide. Through it all, I tightened bolts in the dark. By the time he pulled me completely from the room, I had already mapped the room's exits. I marked every cancellation, filed every change log, captured every Slack thread where he wrote, "Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. No need to overthink it." I wasn't planning revenge. Revenge is loud. I was planning survivability. Survivability is quiet, and it keeps receipts. One night, late, as the office air vents hummed like a steady heart, a message from Maya landed. "You okay? Just checking on you." I didn't cry. I calculated. If she was reaching out directly, my silence had grown louder than his noise. I typed one line. "Yes, but you might want to request page 14, paragraph 3E in the staffing agreement." I didn't explain it. I didn't have to. Every acquisition has a page 14, the footnote where the fuse hides, waiting for the person who knows how to light it. The more Travis strutted, the quieter I became. Not out of defeat, but out of calculation. In corporate wars, noise is camouflage. Silence is aim. I stopped raising my hand in meetings, mostly because I wasn't in them anymore. The invites disappeared from my calendar, replaced by placeholders labeled strategic transformation. That was Bryce's doing, his innovation initiative that amounted to buzzwords scrawled across a whiteboard like graffiti in an abandoned frat house. I didn't push back. I simply opened a new folder on my desktop called Gaps and began to map the cracks in the walls. I wrote down every discrepancy, vendor renewals delayed, invoices stuck in limbo, compliance checklists stripped of safeguards. Each red tag on my Outlook was a breadcrumb, a reminder that chaos doesn't need enemies, it just needs leaders who don't know the difference between vision and vandalism. Meanwhile, Nordell's people kept circling. First, polite CCs. Then, direct questions. Then the side channel calls. What began as 15-minute alignment chats turned into reviews with multiple Nordell execs on the line. Alan, calm and surgical. Maya, sharp enough to cut glass but measured like a metronome. Their legal advisor, who rarely spoke but always scribbled notes. I never editorialized. Never once did I say, Travis is incompetent. I didn't need to. All I had to do was answer questions with precision. Do we have a risk matrix post-close? Yes, Q2, tab 4, column G. Evidence of misalignment on Q4 deliverables? Yes, see 2 conflicting strategy docs. Exposure from compliance platform migration? Yes, see audit trail, page 3, line 17. I kept my tone flat, documentary-like, as if narrating a disaster film in which I happened to be both the survivor and the archivist. The more I spoke fact, the clearer the picture became. Travis was a liability, Bryce a distraction, and the operational skeleton of Core Sentry belonged to me alone. And then came the draft. It arrived at 2:07 a.m. Forwarded from Nordell's Transition Council. Core Sentry Transition Staffing. Internal Review. No body text, just an attachment. 73 pages of legalese and placeholders. My eyes scanned until they froze on one line, blank like a seat at an empty table. Continuity lead, TBD. I sat there in the dark, the glow of my laptop painting shadows across the walls, heart beating with a rhythm that wasn't quite fear, wasn't quite triumph. It was inevitability. The kind of inevitability you feel when a train has been barreling toward the same destination for months, and you realize you've been laying the tracks yourself. I didn't move the email to my gaps folder. I created a new one. I named it Fuse. The following week, Travis unveiled his masterstroke. A company-wide rebrand. Fonts he found on TikTok. Slogans lifted from expired leadership blogs. Streamlined. Synergized. Savage. He hosted brainstorming sessions with kombucha and beanbags, asking finance why cash flow wasn't just more sales. HR clapped politely. Marketing pretended to take notes. I sipped burnt coffee and thought about page 14. Because page 14 wasn't just a clause. It was a weapon. A dormant one, yes, but weapons don't need to shout. They just need the right trigger. And Travis, with every cocky grin, every cancellation email, every skipped deadline, was pulling the pin himself. Maya's late-night message came quietly. You okay? Just checking on you. I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I calculated. If she was reaching out, it meant my silence had become louder than his theatrics. It meant Nordell had already drawn their conclusion. Travis was wrought with a tie, and I was the cure no one wanted to admit they needed. I replied with one sentence. Yes, but you might want to request page 14, paragraph 3E in the staffing agreement. That was all. No explanation. No editorializing. Because if you know, you know. And if you don't, you shouldn't be leading an acquisition worth $600 million. From there, the war wasn't loud. It was a paper war, a war fought in CC lines and redlined contracts, in silent nods and sticky notes marking the places no one else bothered to read. I became methodical. Every mistake Travis made, I documented. Every Slack thread he sent where he wrote, "Let's just rip the Band-Aid off," I screenshotted. Every meeting invite he declined, I archived. I wasn't collecting revenge. I was collecting inevitability. The Nordell execs noticed. They began inviting me to informal reviews, where my name appeared not as a courtesy, but as a requirement. Carol R. Assess System Restoration Roadmap. Carol's Audit Log Summary. Carol to advise post-compliance migration. Travis's name didn't appear once. And that was when I realized this wasn't survival anymore. It wasn't even revenge. It was alignment. Quiet, deliberate, corporate alignment. The clause was waiting. The card was waiting. The timing was waiting. All I had to do was stay silent long enough for the noise to collapse on itself. And noise, as any operator knows, never lasts. By the time autumn bled into the final quarter, the company was running on duct tape, caffeine, and my private file folders. Travis believed he was orchestrating a revolution. In truth, he was hosting a circus where the clowns had better instincts than the ringmaster. Bryce was still doodling buzzwords on his whiteboard. HR was still clapping politely in meetings. And finance had taken to sending me encrypted side notes, desperate for someone, anyone, to understand the real numbers. I had stopped correcting people publicly. Why bother? Every time I tried, Travis cut me off with a sermon about adaptability or visionary leadership. He wore the words like armor, mistaking sound for strength. Instead, I wrote, documented, stored. And one night, with a half-burnt coffee in my hand, I finally opened the staffing draft I had tucked away in the fuse folder. 73 pages, legalese thick as tar, org charts half-filled, tables of compliance and risk protocols. My eyes moved past them like a scanner until they stopped. Page 14, paragraph 3E. The words sat there, dormant. All staffing decisions related to transition phase operational personnel must receive final approval from the designated continuity lead, whose sole authority may not be overridden by temporary or interim executives not ratified by the board. Below it, one line, still empty. Continuity lead, TBD. I leaned back, the chair creaking under the weight of the realization. There it was, the fuse. The buyers hadn't filled it in yet, but they had carved the space for it, deliberately, strategically, as though waiting for me to step into it. Corporate wars aren't won by speeches. They're won in the margins, in footnotes, in clauses that no one bothers to read until the hammer falls. And Travis, too busy practicing his TED Talk hand gestures, had signed drafts without even blinking. He had given me the key to his own undoing. For a moment, I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. Cold, sharp, electric. This wasn't about saving myself anymore. I had already emotionally packed my bags. I was ready to walk out with my dignity and my files. But now it wasn't survival. It was stewardship. Control. I thought of every sleepless night, every fire I had put out without recognition, every time I had been labeled just ops. Ops, as though operations were the janitorial closet of corporate America instead of its bloodstream. Ops, the place where women like me were boxed in, thanked in footnotes, discarded in transitions. But the buyers had seen differently. They had watched me hold the company together while Travis set fire to the curtains. And in silence, they had chosen. That's when I started preparing. Not with fireworks, not with threats. With symbols. I designed a business card. Matte black, white ink, clean font. Not flashy, not loud. Just one name and one title. Carol R. Ellis, Interim COO. Transition Operations. Nordell Systems. I didn't need a press release. I needed a piece of paper that spoke louder than Travis's entire vocabulary of buzzwords. I kept it in my bag like a concealed blade. Waiting. Meanwhile, Travis kept spiraling. He migrated compliant software without legal review, crowing about disruption. 5 critical vendors froze their accounts. 1 threatened to walk away entirely. When finance panicked, I sent Nordell the clean packet. Timestamps, change logs, internal threads, all showing how Travis had pushed the switch without sign-off. Travis tried to spin it, claimed I had resisted innovation, left gaps in the old system. He painted himself as the visionary, me as the obstacle. What he didn't know was that I had screenshots of every meeting invite he declined, every Slack where he wrote, "Let's just rip the Band-Aid off." I sent the second packet. Maya replied with one word, "Received." After that, my name started appearing in Nordell's meeting notes. Not as background, not as legacy context, but as authority. Carol R., review vendor impact timeline. Carol R., assess compliance restoration. Carol's audit log summary. Travis's name? Absent. Erased before he even knew the ink was dry. The irony nearly broke me when his company-wide email hit my inbox. Subject line: exciting next chapter. Core Sentry to Nordell. A rambling monologue full of MBA cliches and half-digested leadership quotes. He thanked everyone for their resilience and innovation during this transformational journey. Then he used the word continuity, as though he had the faintest clue what it meant. I sipped my coffee and smiled, because continuity didn't belong to him. It never had. And by the time we walked into that final acquisition meeting, the paper in my bag would speak the truth. I wasn't boxed out. I was boxed in. They had built the box around me and left Travis tap dancing on the lid. That night, I forwarded the draft to my personal email. Subject line: just in case. Then I closed my laptop, smoothed my blouse, and walked past Travis's office. He was laughing at some meme Bryce had sent, smoothie straw dangling from his lips like a trophy. He didn't look up. He didn't notice. And why would he? To him, I was invisible. To him, I was already gone. But invisibility is a mask. And sometimes, when the timing is right, the mask is the sharpest weapon of all. The acquisition meeting was staged like theater. A mahogany table stretched the length of the room, chrome pitchers of mineral water gleaming under recessed lights. Branded folders, Core Sentry's logo embossed in silver, were laid out as if professionalism could be mass-produced like party favors. The Nordell executives sat with the stillness of poker players, holding royal flushes, every gesture calculated, every silence sharpened. Travis entered as though it were his coronation. He adjusted a tie too tight, winked at a buyer he had only ever spammed on LinkedIn, and paced to the head of the table like a man hosting a game show. "We're excited. We're aligned. We're leaner than ever," he said, arms cutting the air as if movement could create meaning. Then, with a solemn nod, he delivered his finale. "And I'd like to thank Carol Ellis, who will be transitioning out over the next 2 weeks." Bryce clapped first, loyal as a dog to the last scrap of meat. HR followed with a polite nod. A junior counsel typed notes with the enthusiasm of someone cataloging the Titanic's dinner menu. Across the table, Maya from Nordell raised a single eyebrow. That was all. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out the card. Matte black, white ink, clean font. No speech, no flourish, just my hand sliding it across the table to Nordell's CEO. He glanced down, and then it happened. Laughter. Not cruel laughter, but sudden, delighted, like a man who had just been handed the punchline to a joke he didn't know he'd been part of until now. The sound sliced through the room, sharper than any gavel. Travis blinked, thrown off script. "Something funny?" he asked, his voice wobbling at the edges. The CEO didn't answer. He tilted the card toward his legal rep, who read it and smiled, a knowing grin, the kind you see when the game has already been won. Then, with slow precision, Alan from Nordell opened his binder and flipped directly to a tab marked with a single yellow sticky note. Page 14. Paragraph 3E. The fuse I had been guarding for months. The room fell still. You could hear Bryce swallow. Carol represents the transition leadership for Core Sentry's operational integration, Maya said calmly, her voice like glass sliding into place. "That was agreed upon legally. With your signature, Mr. Harrison." Travis's face drained of color. "No, there's no way that's binding. She can't." The CEO slid the contract across the table, tapping the clause with one steady finger. "Page 14, he said. Continuity lead, Carol R. Ellis. Final staffing authority for all post-acquisition operations." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was verdict. Travis's mouth opened, closed, opened again. His hands hovered above the table as if trying to grasp something that wasn't there. Bryce muttered into his phone and fled the room. HR lowered her eyes to the table's wood grain. Legal didn't blink. They'd seen this coming, maybe even helped plant it. "Your signature is here, Mr. Harrison," the CEO continued, turning the document. "Page 17. Travis read it. His name, in ink, beneath a clause that handed me every ounce of authority he thought he had stolen. He looked up, voice cracking. She was never supposed to." The CEO didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned back, arranging chess pieces mid-match. "So about your 2 weeks, Travis," he said smoothly. "We're reallocating you to facilities ops in Kansas City. Shift B, nights. They could use help with forklift scheduling." The words landed like a sentence. Travis didn't sit. He didn't storm out. He simply froze, a man suspended in the ruins of his imaginary empire. Around him, the room had already moved on. HR passed me a small envelope. Inside, my Nordell badge. Carol R. Ellis, Interim COO, Transition Operations, Americas. I clipped it to my lapel. The snap echoed louder than Travis's entire monologue from 10 minutes earlier. "Thank you all," I said, standing. I look forward to getting started. No one objected. No one moved. Because it was done. I turned toward the door. Behind me, Travis's voice cracked, soft, broken. "Wait, she reports to you?" The CEO smiled, slow and precise. "No," he said. "She is me for the next 90 days. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to." I walked out, leaving Travis drowning in the one thing he had never believed he'd face: consequence. And that is the thing about corporate revenge. It isn't a spectacle. It isn't fireworks. It's paperwork. It's silence. It's a clause on page 14 and a card handed across a table at exactly the right moment. Revenge, in the end, is continuity. And continuity had always been mine. And that brings our story to a close. We witnessed how Ellis, once underestimated and pushed aside, turned silence into strength and transformed a forgotten clause into a decisive victory. A reminder that true power often hides not in noise, but in quiet preparation. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you and your family good health, happiness, and peace. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next powerful drama that life has to offer. See you again in the next episode.